Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Tonight our main speaker is Cubby.
Good evening. My name is Cubby Selby, and I am an alcoholic. And I hope to die martyr. It's 10 o'clock?
No. It's the egg timer.
Oh, am I laying an egg already, man? Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. I don't know how long I've been coming to this meeting, but it's been a while. I've always enjoyed it. I should start by telling you that I'm an alcoholic that never drank in high school, and I never drank in college. I never went to high school, and I never went to college. And I learned how to drink the way we all do. Take the top off the bottle, forget where you put it, and that's it. But I should also tell you that I love alcohol. I love it. I adore it. I've worshipped it. Oh, God. For me, it's not a coincidence that the word spirit means God and it means booze. Because if you're anything like me, man, it was a wonder of wonders. It's obvious to me today that alcohol must have done a whole lot for me in order for me to be willing to let it do so much to me. And ultimately, it destroyed everything that I held of value. To put it as simply as possible, I didn't do all the loving, kind things I always wanted to do, and I did all the mean-spirited and rotten things I knew that no human being should ever do. But occasionally, it just created the grand illusion. Oh, God, what a wonder of wonders alcohol is. I love it more today than I ever did in my life, because the longer I'm sober, the more aware I am of the extent of my illness. And I realize how much alcohol did for me. Because it made it possible for me to exist in a world that I've never understood, a world that has always been hostile to everything I've held of value. And it's still true. I mean, I think anybody who can say they really like this world is crazy. You have to be insane to feel comfortable in a world that's insane. Obviously, there's something wrong with you. But what I'm learning how to do is to allow it do what it wants to do, and learning how to practice these principles in all my affairs. So I don't have to be a part of that madness anymore. And I have enough of my own. I have plenty of my own. I don't need to borrow anymore. Well, basically what alcohol did for me is it made me a holy man. Because I've never known what's happening at the moment. But in retrospect, I can see that all my life I was consumed by feelings. And I had no idea what they were, but I knew they were bad. I knew they were evil. I knew there was something really rotten about me. And so I tried to hide from these feelings with an all-consuming rage. And I went through life like a scream, looking for a mouth. And I just never realized. There was no way that I could understand that I was always overwhelmed with a sense of shame and guilt and inadequacy. And I knew there was something so evil about me I didn't deserve to live. But I believe the worst thing of all was I felt separated from myself. That is absolutely unbearable. I don't believe any human being can truly live. You can stay alive perhaps, but you can't truly live feeling separated from yourself. And I had no idea that's what I was experiencing all my life. There's no way that I can know it when I've experienced it my entire life. I live in a world of duality. I can't have up without down, left without right. So I have no idea what it is I'm experiencing until something changes that feeling. And that's what alcohol did for me. Oh, man. I'd go into a bar totally fractured, alienated, decimated, tortured, tormented. Oh, my God. And I'd take a drink. And the angels sing. Oh, it's marvelous. I take a drink and I become a holy man. Oh, I become one whole, solid, unified being. And I have a sense of peace that I never knew existed. The grand illusion has taken over. So I can't accept I'm powerless over alcohol, man. It appears to be solving every problem I've ever had. However, there are some people who object to my drinking. I see nothing wrong with it. But other people do. So, and they explain, because I'm a blackout drinker. I drink, blackout. And they explain to me what I do. And so I'm forced to agree that perhaps my drinking's a problem for you. It's still the answer for me. But it's true, I drink, I black out, and I become extraordinarily homicidal. So I'll come into the joint, have a drink, and I might kill you. But that's the chance I have to take, you see. And believe me, I'm willing to take that chance. I mean, you know, another Yahoo, more or less, it's not important. I mean, everybody goes belly up someday anyway. I'm willing to take any chance to experience that sense of unity and that sense of peace. Anything to get rid of that tortured, tormented babbling and screaming in my head. So I can't accept that I'm powerless over alcohol. Now, I left home at 15. I went to sea. I was a merchant seaman during the Second War. And by the time I was 18, I was in a hospital in Germany, and they said I couldn't live more than 2 months. I had TB, and both lungs were totally destroyed. Yet just, I don't know, about 2 weeks before this particular day, while going through the canal in Antwerp, I jumped off the ship. I ran to a wine shop. I got all the wine I could carry, and I ran back to the ship. Now, it wasn't a great distance, but today I look at that fact that I'm probably a non-alcoholic would not run that distance for 4 or 5 bottles of wine when they didn't have any lungs. You see. However, I understand singleness of purpose in a way that they don't, you know. I know how to focus my energy constructively. So I couldn't see where that indicated that I have an abnormal relationship with alcohol. And I couldn't see where my life had become unmanageable. Yet by the time I was 22 years old, I'd spent more than 3 years in bed. Altogether, I was in the hospital for 4 years. I had 10 ribs cut out. I had one lung collapsed, a piece of the other lung cut out. And they used an experimental drug to keep me alive. And it impaired my vision and my hearing. My inner ear was almost totally destroyed. And I couldn't walk properly, and I'd stumble, fall down in the dark. All my muscles were petrified from this drug, and it fried my brain. It destroyed whatever brain I had left. And then I got hepatitis in the blood transfusions. And then things started to get bad. I don't know what the hell's so funny. But you see, that's a guarantee we have as drunks. No matter how bad things are, drinking will eventually make them worse. That is just a flat-out guarantee. You You cannot avoid or stop in any way the progression of alcoholism. It just keeps getting worse and worse every day of your life. But again, I can't see these things at the time. Now, I've always known in my innermost self that I'm alcoholic. So in order to keep that information away from my awareness, I had to develop a belief system of lies. I had to teach myself what is true is false and what is false is true. The basic lie being that alcohol is the answer, not the problem. And one of the things I did to defend my right to drink was use heroin. And I devised a heroin sobriety maintenance program for myself. And it proved conclusively to me that I am not an alcoholic. Because you can't possibly be an alcoholic if you're shooting $100 a day worth of stuff and only getting drunk once or twice a month or whenever necessary. So from that point of view, it worked perfectly. It was a very, very valid treatment. However, it got a little habitual and rather expensive. Now, the second step, of course, implies that we're nuts. So what I did was I left New York and I moved to Hollywood to get away from drugs. You'll find that listed under keen alcoholic thinking. But because I'm so sincere, it worked. It worked perfectly by courtesy of the LA Sheriff's Department. Make a long story short, I got busted. They strapped me down in solitary, and I kicked that habit. Which is the no-frills approach of doing it. I'll tell you, man, it's guaranteed. I don't care what it is you want to stop doing. Under those conditions, you'll stop instantly. After a week, they asked me if I wanted to come out, and I said no. I can't tell you how safe I felt in that cell. By this time, I could no longer deny that somehow I was doing something that was creating the madness in my life. I didn't know how I was doing it or what I was doing it. I was still incapable of associating my trouble with my drinking. But I couldn't deny that I was doing something, and I knew I couldn't do anything to me locked in that cell, so I stayed there. And after a month, they kicked me out, put me with population for a month, and then somebody bailed me out, put me in a hospital for a month, and then suddenly I was back out on the streets in the same world that I've never understood, the same world that I just can't seem to get along in. Only this time I hadn't had a drink for 90 days. And I could no longer really believe in the belligerence and hostility that I always generated to hide my fear from you and from me. And I was so terrified I couldn't go through an intersection unless I was going for a drink. It was the only motivation that would get me across the street. And that went on for 15 months, and the woman I was living with brought another woman home with 3 children because they had no place to live, so we moved them in. And this fellow used to come and visit with me. He'd come and see her, and then one Friday night he visited with me. Now, I never saw this man before, not that I remember anyway. But I do remember him coming into the room. It was a Friday night. And I remember a couple of things very clearly. He walked across the room and he sat in a chair, and he never went near my bottle of wine. He didn't look at it, he didn't touch it, he didn't mention it. And I think he was there all night, and I only remember maybe 30 seconds or so. But I remember him sitting down, and the next thing I remember is he walked over to me and he dropped a book in my lap. And he said, "I'm tired. You read to me." Now, I remember him saying that very clearly, so I assumed from that he had been reading to me, but I have no memory of it. And I remember taking this book, putting it on the table, opening it up, and that's the last thing I remember from the night. And it turned out that I read from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Obviously, I didn't read the entire text. You know, those last 5 or 6 years of drinking, we tend to take sudden naps. People object to, well, we just disappear. Well, just sitting there. Yeah. But evidently, I read enough to identify with the problem and to recognize the answer. And obviously, you can't recognize the answer until you have identified the problem. So he took me to a meeting the following night, and I've been sober ever since, and that was the 29th of March, 1969. And a couple of things happened in the next few hours that forced me to believe that miracles are possible without my consent. And believe me, I am so delighted to know that. You know, because if I had to consent to the miracle, given the nature of my alcoholic personality, you know what I would tell you to do with that miracle, and how far up. I would be forever at the airport waiting for my ship to come in. It's just the nature of my illness. But I don't have to consent to the miracle. However, I believe absolutely that at some point I must make a conscious decision to cooperate with that miracle if I want to experience it for the rest of my life. You can stay sober for a long time on the initial surrender. I've heard people say as long as 8 years just on that initial surrender. I have no idea. I'm sure everybody's time is different. But sooner or later, I must make that conscious decision. See, I've come to believe that what we call life is extraordinarily simple. From examining my life's experience with the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous and looking carefully at the first few pages of Chapter 5, it seems to me that life is simply a series of decisions, actions, and results. Results always inevitable, at times predictable. And I also believe that somehow I made a decision to be unaware of my decisions. Therefore, the things that happen in my life I'm not responsible for. You know, I'm always a victim of circumstances, perpetually. I believe that so thoroughly that I had a shrink tell me once that I'm unlucky. Oh, man. You know how many years of justified drinking you get out of a remark like that? Oh, heaven bless that man. He was truly a nice guy. I mean, he really was. But anyway, I have to make that decision. I have to accept responsibility for my life. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous allows me to do. It doesn't say change your thinking so you can change your actions. He says, well, you know, it never worked before. Maybe we'll try something else. Maybe we'll try changing our actions. And then maybe that feeds back and changes the thinking. So I can examine the results of my actions. When I examine the results through the principles of this program, I can see what action I took that led up to that result. And when I examine that action, I can see the decision, always based on self, that led to the action and the result. I could never do that before. I didn't have the means. I couldn't afford to, because anything of that nature would threaten my right to drink, and I just couldn't do that. I had to always defend my right to drink. So anyway, this guy takes me to a meeting, and I hated this meeting. Oh, good Lord, did I hate it. I hated everything about it. And when I left that meeting that night, there was only one thing I knew with absolute certainty. I am not an alcoholic. That I knew without doubt. Yet I was given the gift of sobriety that night. As I said, I have not had a drink since that night, and the obsession to drink was removed. I wasn't aware of it for many, many months, but the obsession to drink was removed that night. So I didn't have to consent to that miracle, even though I maintained that I am not an alcoholic. For me, I'm the kind of person that demands of myself I define my terms. I have to define my terms. Even in my own head, I have to keep asking myself that. Because I hear a lot of people say a lot of things in AA, and I wonder what they mean. I hear the words, but what do they mean? And I always have to ask myself, what do you mean? So I hear a lot in AA about here through grace. Through the grace of God, I'm sober. And I have to ask myself, Cubby, what is grace? What the hell does grace mean in your life? How did grace, whatever it is, express itself in your life? And I believe grace expressed itself in my life by giving me the gift of sobriety and then allowing me to stay physically sober until I was in the necessary condition to make a conscious decision. Do I want to continue to be sober, or do I want to go back to drinking? Booze was not making the decision when that decision was made. I had to make that decision. And I believe for me, that defines grace in my life. So I hated this meeting. Yet when I go home, I hear myself say to this guy, can I go to another meeting? And when I said that, I took the second step. Now, I had no intention of saying that, believe me. And I've come to realize that I did not say that. Not the I that I defined as Cubby at that moment in my life. At that moment in my life, I thought Cubby consisted of this body, the mind, and all those hideous and heinous thoughts that went through the mind. I believe those thoughts defined me. So naturally, I was terrified of me, and I loathed me. But there is so much more to me than that. There is, at the very least, an inner spirit. And that inner spirit recognized a power in that room that could restore me to sanity. And it spoke those words through me. And as I said, when I spoke those words, I took the second step. Now, the next morning, I got up, and I started my day in the usual manner. I started a fight with this woman I was living with in order to justify storming out of the house and getting drunk. I have to justify my drinking because I know within my heart I have no business drinking. My drinking was extremely destructive and very, very violent. I had no business doing it, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't, and then there was just nothing else I could do. I had to drink. But I had to justify it in some way. So I started a fight with her. I went storming out of the house. And I was standing on the corner waiting to cross the street because I'm a good citizen. I obey the law. I waited for the light to turn green, I think. I have no idea what color it was, but I was standing there waiting. And the same voice that I've heard assaulting me my entire life was there that morning screaming at me. Yet on the basis of this one AA meeting, which I hated, 2 words were changed in this lifelong litany. And it said, I'll show her. I won't drink. I'll stay sober. And my body turned around and went back to the house. And that morning, the second step took me. I was restored to sanity. Now, I have been mad as a hatter most of my sobriety, but I have been totally and absolutely sane with respect to alcohol since that moment. And how I define sanity is very simple. I could no longer believe the lies necessary to believe in order to justify taking the first drink. I could no longer believe that drinking would improve the quality of my life in any way. I have been absolutely sane with respect to alcohol since that moment. Now, I don't limit the sanity available to just that. However, if you're alcoholic without that foundation of sanity, no other form and or degree is possible. But with that foundation, every form and every degree is not only possible, but it is absolutely infinite. Can't even see what time it is here. So the second step takes me, my body goes back to the house, and I don't drink for 30 days. And I guess that was my grace period. Just like an insurance policy. I never thought of that before. Anyway, I don't drink for 30 days, and at the end of 30 days, I'm stark raving sober. Now, as we all know, there's only one thing worse than drinking, and that's not drinking. And that's precisely why we are here. To find out how to live without drinking. We have a living problem. And the reason for that I'm stark raving sober is very simple. So you take away the most important thing in someone's life, you must replace it with something of value. Nature cannot and will not accept a vacuum. Alcohol had become the most important thing in my life. When you take it out of my life, I'm left with that dark, black, cancerous sense of separation that I started with. So if it's not replaced with something of value, I must and will drink. I have absolutely no choice in the matter because I am powerless over alcohol, and alcohol is the only thing that has ever appeared to heal that unbearable sense of separation. And I believe Alcoholics Anonymous is that something of value that fills that hole and fulfills every need I shall ever have for the rest of my life. So after 30 days, again, this inner sense, this inner spirit, made another decision and got me to take the necessary action. It decided we must cooperate with this miracle. And I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I asked for help, and the help was instantly and automatically there. And the reason for that, again, is simple and obvious, except I can't see the simple and obvious. But the reason is that the answer is in the asking. You cannot have a problem without already having the answer. It is a spiritual impossibility to have a problem without having the answer. However, I still have this belief system of lies that I nurtured to protect my right to drink. So periodically I am unaware of already having what it is I am so desperately looking for. But when I come up to you and say, help me, tell me what to do, I've given up. I've surrendered. I don't know that, but that is what happens. And instantly, the answer, which is always and only within me, there are no answers for me outside of me. There are only answers within me. And instantly that answer, which is always within me, can transcend that belief system of lies. And then when you share with me what you did at that point in your sobriety, you make it possible for me to recognize the answer in whatever way I need to stay sober for the next 24 hours. So after 30 days, I asked for help and I was given a gift of recovery. Now I have a sticky wicket because the kindest thing I ever said about God is it's a dog spelled backwards. And I'm looking at this thing, I don't know what to do. And it's not till years later that I realized that as soon as I asked someone, how do you take the third step, I meant I had already taken it. But I can't see these things at the time. It only asks me to make a decision. And as the book says, it must be followed with a program of vigorous action, meaning the inventory, which is what I did, but I had no idea I was really following what the third step suggests. I was just doing what people said to do. And everyone's talking about prayer. You have to pray, you have to pray. And I didn't know what the heck to do about this. And I still don't know I want to be sober, but yet I'm doing everything that I hear people talk about. So what I ended up doing is copying the third step prayer and the St. Francis prayer and tacking them on the wall. And I wake up in the morning and I read them and go about my business. I'd read them at night and go to bed. And then it seemed like everyone is saying you have to kneel and pray. You have to get on your knees and pray. And I couldn't visualize it. It just seemed so childish. Anyway, but I was desperate. I was absolutely desperate and still unaware that I wanted to be sober. I was so desperate I tried to kneel 20 and 30 times a day. I would try and kneel and pray. And I couldn't do it. My knees weren't having anything to do with this man. You know, hey, we're out to lunch, buddy. Later for you. It wouldn't happen. But I kept trying. And then when I was sober 4 months, I took the fifth step. And when I finished, my sponsor showed me the pages in the book to read it, tell you exactly what to do for 6 and 7. And I went home and I did as the book suggests. And when I had taken the sixth step, I was made aware of it. Now, I've come to believe that the essence of the sixth step is simply that when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, I am willing to let it go. It seems to me I've had the insane belief all my life that I could avoid pain by pursuing pleasure, never understanding where I always ended up so miserable. You know, I couldn't see the simple and obvious. You cannot separate pleasure from pain. They are inseparable, just like the heads and the tails of a quarter are inseparable. It is one package. The difference is perception. That's the only difference between pleasure and pain. However, what do I know? You know? I believe it's impossible for anybody to deliberately and consciously hurt themselves. It's just we have a misconception of what will make us feel good. Of course, I'm dealing with habit patterns that maybe at one time worked perfectly, and they saved my life, but now they're absolutely detrimental to my well-being. But I just can't see these things at the time. See, I don't hold on to the pain of resentment, but what I will cling to is the pleasure of judgment. Thinking I can go home after the meeting, sit in my chair, send God the weasel out for a pizza, and get inside my shrunken pumpkin head and just, oh, God, you talk about power. Oh, God, isn't that wonderful? You want me to give that up? God. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up in a cold sweat, knotted in pain. I feel, well, I'll just roll out of bed and hocus pocus God, right? Oh, God, it hurts so bad. Ooh, oh, boo. Come on, schmuck, get out of my face. You know, it's ridiculous. As if God would be so rotten that he would take away the pain. I can't imagine a God being that rotten. I can imagine a lot of rotten things, but not that. It doesn't occur to me that all I have to do is give up the pleasure of judging you. And it's impossible to experience the pain of resenting you. So I found that when there's no longer a payoff in the defect, well, I'm willing to let it go. Get out of here. So when I'd taken the 6th step, I was made aware of it without thinking. I was on my knees taking the 7th step. And that day I was given a gift of prayer. And I've come to believe the gift of prayer is the most precious thing we're given by whatever this power is that created us. With prayer, it takes on a living reality in our lives. And I know from my experience as the prayer that there is nothing to get. There is only everything to give. And it's only in the process of giving it away that I become aware of having it in the first place. I also know from my experience as the prayer that I don't pray to God, that there is absolutely nothing to pray to, but I pray from God, and it is all totally and absolutely an inside job. I believe the prayer that mends the broken hearts and heals the sick minds that we all bring to Alcoholics Anonymous is the song of love we sing to this thing called God. I believe that song is heard in every heart throughout the world and is heard throughout the entire universe. And with steps 10 and 11, we can not only sit and hear that song, but experience the simple truth that in all of the universe there is only one song, and we are that song. All of God's kids make up that song, and each and every note is just as important as the other. So obviously that means that that song is in constant change, constant change. And for me to experience my part in that song is to continually let go absolutely. And from time to time it happens. And as you know, then we experience that song in our very being, in our souls. And it's something wondrous. It's something, now it happens all the time. However, it's like having that first drink and to see what it did for me. It keeps me coming back. And the experiences I have in Alcoholics Anonymous keep me coming back because I have an addictive nature and I want more of whatever this thing is. I'm willing to work my butt off to get it. So with the 7th step, I was given the gift of prayer. With the 9th step, I was given the gift of love. When I was 6 months sober, I became aware of the fact that I had fallen in love with this thing called God. Now, I had been given up for dead 4 times in the hospital, many times in the street. And the only thing that kept me alive was what I thought was my hatred for God. It literally animated me. It filled me with energy. And yet 6 months with you, it was turned into a love affair. Now, I didn't understand it at the time, but later I read Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. In the back of that book, they quote an old Spanish philosopher. It's a little line that explained my entire life. It said, those who deny God deny him because of their despair at not finding him. The first time I read that line, I understood my entire life. Every breath, every heartbeat. And since then, I've been trying to learn by taking the necessary actions what was revealed to me that day. An old axiom says the holiest ground in the world is where an ancient hatred has been turned into a current love. So because of what has happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever I am standing on the holiest ground in the world. And I believe it is impossible to take the first 9 steps without standing on the holiest ground in the world. I believe it's a predictable and inevitable result of the decisions and actions preceding that step. With the 12th step, I had this 5th and really wondrous gift, my own personal relationship with whatever this living power is that created me. Now, I obviously thought that I have a spiritual awakening, I become God's little sunbeam. That I just would never say another word in anger. I wouldn't chase you down the street in my car into your living room, you know. I would stop doing those things because I've been awakened. And what I was awakened to was why I had to drink. I became mad as a hatter. Not each and every day, but enough to create some problems. To the point where after being together for 15 years, my wife had to leave. You know, I'd stay locked in my room for 3 days at a time. No food, no water, trying to knock the house down with my head. That's not happy, joyous, and free, man. You know, you don't want to live with somebody like that. That tends to cast a gloom over a person's life. So after a while, after 15 years, her sobriety and her life were being threatened by my illness. And so she had to leave, and I accepted responsibility for her need to leave, fortunately for me. So I wasn't chewed up with resentment. Now, we were living back in Massachusetts at the time, and I hadn't worked for at least 5 years. I was physically sick, as well as bananas, and we had no money. And our 12-year-old son elected to stay with me. A friend here in L.A. said we can come back, stay with him till I got on welfare. That's what we did. Billy and I got back here to L.A., and I got on welfare, and I found a little 2-room apartment for Billy and myself. When we moved into that apartment, we had 2 suitcases each. He had an old army cot to sleep on, and I had a piece of foam rubber to sleep on. And that was the extent of our stuff. That was it. And I was 14 years sober. I was suddenly a single parent on welfare. And to this day, I don't know how I survived those years. I'd get up in the morning, I'd make breakfast for Bill. We'd pray, we'd meditate, he'd go to school, and I'd sit there and cry. I just had absolutely no way of dealing with my life. Somehow I didn't drink. I went to meetings and helped drunks, but I just don't know how I did it or what I did. And then I experienced the fellowship in a way that I never had before, because you literally fed us, you clothed us, everything necessary for preserving life came from the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Until that moment, I used to draw a clear distinction between fellowship and program. I can no longer do that. I can no longer separate myself from you, from the program, or whatever this power is that created us and gave us this program. We're all either one, or it's just a total and absolute illusion. And I know it's not an illusion because my experience has proved that to me. And that Christmas, I didn't know what to do for Bill. It seemed so unfair that a 12-year-old boy should not have a regular Christmas because of my illness. And what we ended up doing was going on a Skid Row and serving food to the people. And it was one of the greatest days of my life. I'll never forget that day. He was so happy, making sure the kids down there got extra pie and extra milk, that he literally lit up all of Skid Row. And I was overwhelmed with a sense of privilege and honor to be part of such a wonderful being as Bill. And that's what we did at the holidays while we're living together. And one day my wife called and said she was in love with someone else. And by that time, I didn't even have any tears left. I was just absolutely dry. I was withered inside. And my insides felt empty. And I was just so absolutely devastated. And I always, up until that point in my life, I thought a broken heart was a figure of speech. I never knew it was also a physical reality. I have never experienced a physical pain like that in my life. But as I said, fortunately, there was no resentment, so I wasn't consumed by my disease. And I was praying for my wife, and something absolutely remarkable happened. I heard myself thanking God that she had someone to love, that she had someone to share her life with, to share her body with, to share her program with, and to share her God with. Now, I know that I am not capable of sitting down and consciously formulating such a prayer, but I don't believe I need to. I believe my responsibility there was what my responsibility is every moment of every day. That is simply to make the decision to love.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And then take the appropriate action. In this case, the appropriate action was prayer. And this is what I truly believed happened. I believe your love for me wrote that prayer. And you not only wrote that prayer, but you put the words in my heart so that when my heart broke open, and I could speak those words and experience the love that has always been in my heart. But I had to have that heart break open so it could flow out. I believe the language of love in Alcoholics Anonymous takes on an infinite number of forms. When I got here totally insulated and isolated in the eye of alcoholism, just as we all do, each and every one of us. And I get here, and the very first word of the program is we. We admitted. We not only admit each other to these rooms, we admit each other to our hearts. And instantly, the I of my disease starts to become a part of the we of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in time, as we continue to practice these principles, we experience the one, the oneness of all life. We go from I to we to one. When I got here, you did not judge me by the appearance of my illness. You saw beyond the crazed, drunken beast that I believed I was. Beyond that, you saw a sober being. Within that sober being, you saw light and you saw love. And you held that image of me in your mind as you nurtured me, you loved me, and most importantly of all, you allowed me to make every mistake I must make in order to learn what I need to learn to stay sober for the next 24 hours. And more as I continue to come back to you, I am becoming the image that you have of me, as you are becoming the image that I have of you. And together we are becoming the vision that God has of us. Thank you very much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, in one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.